It's hard to imagine someone who would feel joyous and euphoric upon being fired. Such cases are likely found in nature, but one way or another, negative emotions such as resentment, anger, and anxiety are understandable and even natural. To start with, let's figure out why. We can compare dismissal with someone's departure from their tribe in ancient times. It's one thing when you leave of your own will, having prepared in advance. You have weapons and a supply of food. You're confident in your abilities. You have the necessary skills to survive, and you know where to go. It's an entirely different matter when you are unexpectedly driven out. Perhaps, of course, not completely unexpectedly, and maybe they gave you some weapons and a certain food supply. You must admit, though, that this is a completely different story, and the likelihood of a happy ending is far lower. The importance of our belonging to a society is probably somehow encoded in our genes, as throughout the whole of the history of humanity, people have survived together, in tribes, communities, and families. Perhaps the importance of steady social ties and acceptance in society are imposed by our experience in early childhood, as then our whole world and we ourselves were fully dependent on others, and we couldn't have survived on our own. Whatever the case may be, the essence is that we are not lone beings. People are social animals. Perhaps it is for this reason that we are sensitive to situations where we are rejected, including being fired, as in firing us. Our bosses are essentially saying, "You aren't good enough for us. Leave. We don't need you." Somewhere inside us, a dysfunctional, deep-seated belief might activate, which sounds something like, "Red alert, I can't do it alone." Of course, being fired is serious stress, not only because of this. For our nervous systems, these are changes that are too fast and dramatic to remain calm, even if we were informed about the dismissal several weeks in advance. Not only potential financial difficulties or trouble finding a new job can cause anxiety, but also your change in status and the anticipated response of people who are close or important to you, as well as the forced change of short-term and long-term plans. What's more, it hurts. Being fired is a major blow to your self-esteem. Even if the dismissal is fair and expected, and even if your manager or HR were entirely delicate and said a great deal to support you. The bottom line is that being fired is extremely unpleasant. You can hardly demand calmness and a casual attitude toward what has happened from yourself. Instead, let's discuss how to bounce back faster. Firstly, let's try to find some positive sides of dismissal. A motivation technique based on the Descartes square will be an ideal tool for this. Divide a piece of paper into 4 equal sections. In the top left box, describe the specific advantages of your former work for you. In the top right box, describe its disadvantages. Next, in the bottom left box, write the disadvantages of being fired, and in the bottom right box, the advantages of being fired, in as much detail as possible. Make sure you follow the indicated pattern to fill in the boxes. Don't rush in carrying out this technique. You might need a few days. Secondly, try to challenge your main fears. Write them out in a list and ask specific questions to each of them. What is the most negative scenario if my fear comes true? What can I do if this happens? What scenario would be the most positive in this case? As extreme scenarios seldom become reality, which scenario is the most realistic? What can I do to bring a realistic scenario closer to being a positive one? Thirdly, let's deal with resentment. Any resentment is a story of unjustified expectations from people. Moreover, formulated as oughtness. It could be something explicit. They ought not to be talking to me like that. Or perhaps something deeper. This ought not to have happened to me. Try to reformulate these instances of oughtness in the form of preferences. I would prefer it if they didn't talk to me like that. Or I would prefer it if this hadn't happened to me. Pay attention to the change in your response. The tension usually reduces. Then ask yourself another specific question. Yes, I would prefer it if this hadn't happened. What can I do in these conditions proceeding from the real situation? Fourthly, look for support. Positive support from loved ones heals even worse wounds and gives you strength, energy, and motivation.